The birds didn't leave. They didn't fly away. And most of the time, they aren't even hiding. Yet the moment you step outside, the singing stops. You've probably experienced it before. You wake up early. The yard is full of sound. Robins calling from the trees. Finches chattering near the feeder. Sparrows exchanging their endless conversations from the hedges. The entire yard feels alive. Then you open the door, take a few steps outside, and suddenly, silence. The songs disappear almost instantly. For a moment, it feels as if every bird in the neighborhood has vanished. Most people assume they know why. The birds got scared. The birds don't like people. The birds think you're a predator. And while those explanations sound reasonable, they don't fully explain what actually happened. Because if birds were simply afraid, something else should happen too. They should leave, but often they don't. If you stand quietly and watch, you'll notice something interesting. The robin is still on the branch. The chickadee is still near the feeder. The sparrows are still moving through the bushes. The birds are still there. Only the singing has stopped. That detail turns out to matter far more than most people realize. Because birds don't use song the way humans use speech. They don't sing simply because they feel happy. They don't stop singing simply because they're frightened. In many cases, birds are using song as part of a much larger communication system, a system that has been helping them survive for millions of years. And when that system suddenly changes, it usually means something important has changed too. What makes this fascinating is that birds often become silent before they become alarmed, before they fly away, before they hide. Before humans even realize anything unusual is happening, the silence comes first. And according to researchers who study bird behavior, that silence may be carrying information. Information other birds understand immediately, but information most humans never notice at all. The question is, what are the birds actually saying when they stop singing? Because the answer is far more surprising than most people think. To understand why birds suddenly become silent, you first have to understand what birdsong is actually for. Most people think birds sing because they're happy. It's an idea that feels natural. A bright morning, a beautiful yard, birds singing from every direction, the soundtrack of a peaceful day. But to a bird, song is far more practical than that. Birdsong is information. A robin singing from a fence post is telling other birds where it is. A sparrow calling from a hedge is announcing that the area is occupied. A finch singing from the top of a tree is communicating that conditions are safe enough to remain visible. In other words, singing is something birds do when they can afford to. And that distinction changes everything, because the moment uncertainty enters the environment, communication begins to change. Researchers studying bird behavior have repeatedly observed that many species reduce vocal activity when their attention shifts from communication to observation. Instead of broadcasting information, they begin gathering it. Instead of announcing their presence, they start listening. This is where the silence becomes interesting, because what appears to be the absence of sound is often the presence of something else. Attention. Imagine you're sitting in a crowded restaurant. People are talking, laughing, having conversations. Then suddenly someone drops a glass. For a brief moment, the room changes. Voices become quieter. Heads turn. People listen. Not because they're afraid, because they're trying to understand what happened. Birds often do something remarkably similar. When a new variable enters the environment, they pause communication and increase observation. And here's the part most people never realize. The new variable doesn't always have to be dangerous. It only has to be uncertain. A sudden movement, an unfamiliar sound, a door opening, a person stepping outside. The birds don't immediately know what it means. So they do what nature has trained them to do. They stop broadcasting information and start collecting it. But this is where the story takes a surprising turn. Because the silence isn't only helping the bird that stopped singing. It's helping every other bird nearby. And that hidden network of information is what makes the entire yard go quiet at the same time. This is the part most people never see. Because the silence isn't just about the bird that stopped singing. It's about every bird that heard it stop. For decades, Scientists studying bird communication have observed something remarkable. Many birds are constantly listening to the soundscape around them, not just individual songs. The entire acoustic environment, every robin, every sparrow, every finch, every distant call from the trees. Together, these sounds create what researchers sometimes call an information network, a living stream of updates about what is happening in the environment. As long as birds continue singing normally, that network sends a powerful message. Nothing unusual is happening. Conditions are stable. Life can continue as normal. But the moment singing begins to stop, the message changes. And that change can spread incredibly fast. Imagine you're walking through a forest. Suddenly, every conversation around you stops. No one tells you there's a problem. No one gives an explanation. Yet you instantly know something deserves your attention. Birds experience something very similar. When one bird falls silent, nearby birds notice. When several birds become quiet, even more birds notice. The silence itself becomes information. This is the scientific reveal most people never hear about. Birds are not simply reacting to your presence. They're reacting to a change in the flow of information around them. In many cases, they don't even know whether you're dangerous. Not yet. What they know is that something has changed. And nature has taught them that paying attention to change is often the difference between survival and death. That's why the silence usually comes before flight, before hiding, before panic. Silence is the investigation phase, a moment when communication pauses and observation takes over. The birds are gathering information, listening, watching, trying to understand what happens next. And once you realize this, something fascinating becomes clear. The birds were never trying to avoid making noise around you. They were trying to learn about you. Which brings us to the most surprising part of this entire story. Because what happens after the silence determines whether the birds see you as a threat or simply another part of the landscape. The good news is that the silence was never a rejection. Most people assume birds stop singing because they dislike people, because they've decided humans don't belong, because our presence ruins the moment. But that's not what the research suggests. In reality, the silence is often the beginning of a decision, not the end of one. The birds are gathering information, watching, listening, learning. And what happens next matters far more than the moment they became quiet. If you step outside, remain calm, and move predictably, something interesting often happens. The birds don't leave. They continue watching. A robin returns to feeding. A sparrow moves back into the hedge. A chickadee resumes searching the branches. And eventually, the songs begin again. Not because the birds forgot you were there, because they've finished evaluating the situation. You've become predictable. You've become understood. And in the natural world, understanding creates confidence. What makes this fascinating is that birds are not looking for perfection. They're looking for information. The more predictable a person becomes, the easier that person is to understand. And the easier they are to understand, the less attention birds need to devote to monitoring them. The silence grows shorter. The singing returns faster. The yard begins to feel normal again. So the next time you step outside and the songs suddenly stop, don't assume you've scared every bird away. Most of them are probably still there, still watching, still listening, still trying to decide what kind of story your presence is about to tell. The silence was never empty. It was communication, a message hidden inside behavior, a message birds understand immediately, but humans rarely notice. And once you learn to hear that message, you'll never experience a quiet backyard in quite the same way again. Have you ever stepped outside and noticed the birds suddenly go silent? Tell us what you've observed in the comments. And if this changed how you think about bird behavior, subscribe to Backyard Bird Mind and share it with someone who loves birds as much as you do.